All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thanks so much for joining us today for Winning with a Plant-Based Strategy. Plant-based foods as an alternative to animal-based products are seen by many as one way to achieve a more environmentally sustainable world. Further, plant-based foods address some of the animal welfare and health concerns held by some shoppers about eating animal-based products. So of course, plant-based foods as an alternative to animal-based foods have been around for decades. In 2016, we actually saw the impact of Impossible Burger and Beyond Foods, bringing more plant-based foods into the mainstream with meats and burgers that had taste, texture, and visual appearances very close to beef. But lately, there's been a lot written in the press that plant-based product sales have started to taper off and manufacturing facilities on meat analogs being closed. So today we'll dive into what the food industry might take away from what has happened these past 5 years. Is the recent drop in sales an indication of a failed plant-based strategy? And what can be learned to achieve greater success? So we'll start off with a few introductions. I'm Carrie Janot, VP of Marketing here at InsightsNow. And I have the pleasure today of moderating this conversation with Greg Stucky, our Chief Research Officer, and Webb Girard, Senior Director of Research and Development at CuliNex. So Webb, do you mind giving us a little background for those who may not know CuliNex yet?
Yeah, CuliNex is a leading food innovation and product development consultancy, delivering delicious, clean label and plant-based foods at the leading edge of technology and innovation. We provide an array of food development solutions and strategic business services, partnering with clients of every size, form, emerging brands, million-dollar CPG companies, ingredient manufacturers, commodity boards, commissions, retailers, and food service operators.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Webb. And then if anyone's new to our education series, we do Q&A at the end, but throughout this event, you could reach out to us using that Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. All right, well, with that, let's jump in. All right, so let's start off by talking about price. Plant-based meats are more expensive than animal-based meats for sure. So for example, we did pull Mintel data into the average category price point plants and really found that plant-based burgers are 41% more expensive than animal-based burgers. So what does this mean for plant-based food manufacturers?
Thanks, Carrie. I'll start with this one. So, the fact that you've got products coming out there with a price premium, in fact, a whole category of products is sitting at a price premium over the analog that they're, as an analog of what they're trying to mimic. And the challenge here for the industry and from a consumer standpoint is that 42% of the US shoppers, this price, upscaled price, is a barrier to entry for them. They're not going to be willing to trade off price in order to get something that has additional value for themselves. So, for instance, we know that 53% of people will trade away environmentally friendly in order to get the lower price. So, 53% of people are, if the value proposition is environmentally friendly, 53% of people are like, nope, I'm not going to do that. Price is more important than that. So since that large portion of the population is so financially challenged, even though they might aspire to buying plant-based foods, they really financially can't do it. So this is a really significant barrier to the growth of this meat alternative category. So for me, that's a really important part. So it kind of comes back then to Webb. You're the designer on this of products like this. So like from a design standpoint, why are plant-based products so expensive?
Yeah, I think it really starts with we're still building the infrastructure around it all. Finding manufacturing is a challenge, especially as some of the larger companies that have gone into plant-based have retracted, shut down their operations before even pulling them pulling plant-based into it, and even rededicating plant-based space into and full meat alternatives, finding contract manufacturing for new plant-based materials on the marketplace extremely difficult. A lot of the processes that we use for plant-based meats, burgers, and chicken nuggets in particular use the same processes and machinery as full meat products, and a lot of the companies do not want to add that extra component onto their line, or that extra complexity into their process. Adding allergens such as soy or wheat are big concerns to bring into a meat manufacturing facility. Some of the ingredients are just cost prohibitive or more expensive to do. So you're working at sourcing and building the supply chain for those ingredients, and the cost of raw materials over the past year even have increased pretty significantly. We had some of our isolated soy proteins increased 23% in a 6-month span, just from the infrastructure. So it's difficult to keep up with the prices, but even then, plant-based meats aren't just one ingredient. We're combining textured proteins and isolates, colors, flavors, and a bunch of different components together, which to get the really good quality analog products, cost and use is significantly high, upwards of a couple $100 a pound for a flavor, just to bring in a nuance that's in there at 0.5%. So it adds a lot of cost to get value out of it. And then just the supply chain for the proteins that I already discussed, but fats supply chain is pretty significant as palm oil comes into it. Just last year, one of the larger palm oil supplying countries shut down for 2 months, and that stock of readily available ingredients isn't there to pull from. So long lead times to get those materials in.
Wow. Yeah. So so you got a really challenging infrastructure there. So with really high costs for raw materials, or how about very quickly rising costs of raw materials, without the volume there to support like a commodity level pricing, given you have that baseline, I mean, are there any other ways, if you will, that you can see to bring the price down on plant-based products? Maybe, they don't have to like drop below the meat analogs, but is there any way to get closer to animal parity with animal-based products?
I mean, that's the goal, is to get down or below parity. One of the clients that we have worked with is trying to establish a process improvements to make the process of making plant-based more in line with meat-based analogs. Batch driving process is pretty significant in order to maintain the quality of plant-based, but even the scale up at infrastructure in meat operations, the scale to make the processes more efficient aren't. You bring texture protein and you have to soak for 20 minutes. That's time that you can't just drop the meat and grind and make patties. So now you've got a batch may take of a plant-based burger may take 40 to 60 minutes, whereas a meat-based burger is grind and produced, so that line time is pretty significant. But even just in creating a better supply chain for readily available materials is pretty important. The flip side of that is the supply chain's not getting created if the demand's not there. So it's kind of which is going to flip first to provide the value for it.
Gotcha. And is like simplicity of ingredients, is that an opportunity within that space too?
I think that's simplicity is a challenge depending on what you're targeting to produce. The more simple of the output, the more complex the formula will be.
Gotcha.
Okay. So let's explore consumers' environmental concerns versus taste. So our research has shown that 47% of people who are buying plant-based meat alternatives today are willing to trade away taste to be environmentally friendly. And we saw how plant-based foods that were analogs that were not at parity in taste with animal-based products took off 5 years ago. What does this mean for plant-based food manufacturers? Is taste still important?
Yeah, I love this. I love this statistic because it kind of is that double-edged sword of information at you. So the people who are buying plant-based today, yeah, there's a huge portion, nearly half the people buying plant-based meat today are willing to trade away taste. Well, I think part of the reason that statistics exist is because they needed to trade away taste to get there. So you were grabbing the people first to the category who were willing to make those sacrifices. So really this comes back a lot to who are you targeting? If we're going to grow this space, there certainly are a group of current plant-based meat buyers for whom taste is less important than some of the other value propositions put on it, like sustainability. However, if you are wanting to grow the category, you've got to go to the people outside the current buyer network. So our research also found that 73% of the people who don't buy plant-based today are not willing to trade away taste. So if you're going to go into the people who aren't buying today, taste is very, very important. Basically, 3 in 4 people are saying taste is more important than sustainability in order to buy into this space. So if you want to be able to connect with those people and bring them into the space, you got to be able to deliver on taste. It's like table stakes for them, right? Something they're not willing to trade away. So we often talk about the plant-based bacon as an example. It's kind of the holy grail in my mind of plant-based foods, and there's a lot of good products out there, but nobody's gotten all the way to that full mimicry of the emotional experience and sensory experience that comes with the real bacon. So if you really want to achieve in that space, there's a lot of opportunity to drive new formulations, new ways to get to success. So there's still room for products that don't quite measure up on taste, but you're never going to like flip to that really big pullable in market unless you can deliver something that really does have a fantastic taste. So, for me, I think that piece is definitely a barrier that we can overcome, and is a barrier to adoption, if you will. So, Webb, going back to you, I mean, you come from an entire lifestyle that's focused around building things that are just amazing to taste. So, like, what's the challenges in this space for you?
I think the challenge is, as I mentioned before, the simpler it is, the harder it is to do. So a burger patty, burger just has so much flavor in its own right. So trying to put in fat flavors and beef flavors and heme flavors and grilled flavors and have the fat melt out. Plant-based fat doesn't melt like meat fat. Having the texture of vegetables eat like meat. The bar is much higher to achieve on a burger alternative, whereas in a nugget alternative, it's breaded, it's coated, it's fried, it's crispy, it's delicious. The hurdle's lower, so the adoption is easier. The formulation's simpler, simpler ingredients, simpler output, because the expectation is less. So it's really trying to match up how complicated to make the formula to hit that hurdle, and where the consumer is willing to meet in the middle. I think also we have ingredients now that we didn't have 3 years ago, and the landscape is ever changing on what our toolbox is to bring some of that out there. I mean, Impossible on screen, they have the heme. That's really the characterizing flavor of that product, and one of the things that's most difficult to match in it, both from a flavor and a color standpoint. So it's pretty significant advantage to have developed that technology and limiting everyone else from getting to that spot.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So now you mentioned the nugget space. Like, one of the things that we saw in our research was that 64% of shoppers were wanting to buy products that were more convenient to prepare. And we kind of hammer a lot on the analog products like here ground meat, but some of the simpler to prepare products, maybe pre-prepared versions that are more like a heat and eat, that are designed around those convenience. Seems like that theoretically might be a pathway then to getting something that fits into the space at a more affordable price.
You definitely defer a lot of the cost with some of the other ingredients, quinoa or rice or pizza crust, things like that let you eat that lifestyle and not have to worry about taking a pound of ground beef and putting on burger buns. You're also able to more thoughtfully formulate flavors and experiences in there, and bringing the whole system together, where I don't have control over how that burger is placed on a bun with the cheese and the sauce and everything, but I do have control over making a bowl with plant-based cheese and sausage crumbles and rice and seasonings and all that other stuff that really make it a complete dish, giving everybody what they're asking for at a price they can afford.
Huh, that makes a lot of sense.
Awesome. So this brings us to our final topic, clean label.
Oh,
So
yeah.
our research has shown that clean label is an aspiration for 77% of people. So what does this mean for plant-based food manufacturers? Are plant-based foods necessarily clean label? Will shoppers trade away clean label for more environmentally friendly plant-based foods?
Yeah, Webb, do you want to take that one first? How does clean label look for you?
Yeah, clean label is the foundation of what we work on as a company, and making things as simple and true to the food as possible. Really focusing on the food first and the technology second. Plant-based changes clean label in terms of what the rules are. Methyl cellulose, modified food starches, ingredients that have not been traditionally clean label, but are often necessary to hit those sensory attributes that you want for plant-based ingredients. So there's a big trade-off on what the consumer is willing to do from a label perspective, recognizing that these aren't natural ingredients or clean label ingredients, but still wanting that plant-based experience. The other trade away we've seen is genetically modified organisms. So non-GMO hasn't been as a big issue, and possible has it. It's there, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just what it is. It's the consumer is looking for that plant-based over those call outs necessarily. It's really aspirational. There's other ways you can make it part of your complete diet. But those are things that we've seen. There aren't very easy clean label replacements for some of the ingredients that have made plant-based what it is today.
Yeah, that makes sense. And is a really good point that you talk about, like GMOs and other aspects of clean label. One of the things that we're seeing is that clean label means different things to different people. So there's groups of people like clean label enthusiasts, like we've at InsightsNow have been tracking for a long time. It's about 15% of the people right now who are in this particular space, just, very ingredient focused when it comes to their definition of clean label. And they're basically trying to avoid bad or whatever they consider their current unhealthy product or unhealthy ingredient, sorry. And things like methyl cellulose kind of come in and out of favor within spaces like that, based on who's talking about the ingredients in what ways. And then there's other groups of people who are, and actually it's a little bit larger group of people who are, when they look at clean label, they think about things like, is it organic? Is it sustainable? Is it environmentally friendly? And they're looking at a little bit more broader picture of what they believe clean means, from the vantage point of, is this product good, not just good for me because it has certain ingredients, but is it also good for the environment and good for society as a whole? So getting like specific about what clean label means, I think is going to be very important, because it is very aspirational, and yet we see people are willing to trade this one off a little bit more than other types of things. So while we saw that 77% want clean label products, we also know that only 29% are willing to trade away clean label to get taste. which is why you see things like, methyl cellulose, right? To get that sensory experience, okay, I'll make some sacrifices on my clean label ingredients if I can get the sensory experience. So there a big portion of the people who want clean label still are behaviorally willing to make those trade-offs. So I think that's certainly an important piece, because then it shows that it's very aspirational, yet maybe not as impactful or drive people as hard, because they don't have very many choices out there. So, all said and done, if it was fantastic taste, it had the clean label ingredients, that's the coup de grace for them. They'll definitely go for it. But if you have to sacrifice some things in order to get there, we're seeing that could be still a real problem. So that means, if you really want to grow in this plant-based space, you're going to need to be able to deliver on sustainability, taste at a decent price. And that kind of takes us full circle to what we've been talking about this whole time. If we want to engage with plant-based products into people's lives, we got to meet them where they're at. We've got to find the specific moments in their life and those specific experiences we're aiming to improve. And identify what are those moments you're trying to create and build. And that sounds like, Webb, like what you were saying is like, give me the guardrails, make it a little bit more specific, so that I can build a specific solution rather than a big generic. So if we can focus in on specific application solutions, that can help start bringing the price down within the category, with delivery against taste as well as sustainability potentially. Is that pretty accurate?
Yeah, I think as the supply chain and the technology improves, and as long as we're going after more specific applications, we can formulate for specific needs, and get as many of the bells and whistles that we can, whether it be call outs or flavor profiles or eating experiences. There's always going to be that triangle trade-off, and trying to get to, can't get everything. How much can we get? And just keep aspirationally trying to get to the best we can get.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think hitting on these aspirations, what's exciting is that they're there, right? People are still excited about this space, even though maybe in the meat analog space, there's some dipping in sales and closures of plants. I think that the space in general, I mean, from a consumer standpoint, there's still a lot of aspirations here. I think I love the idea that you're bringing, that it's about getting a little bit more specific, help define the space a little bit tighter. And that's going to bring more people into the space because they've got applications that are maybe better fit than just a generic piece of meat that you're not really sure what they're going to do with, or like you said, you can't control, right?
Yeah, I mean, you see a lot of the plant-based burger alternatives out there have a lot of extra flavors in it, which kind of limits some of their uses, because then you're making taco meat that tastes like grill, or you're making lasagna that has a grill note to it. So there's some specific trade-offs that you get when you're going after an isolated target.
Yeah, makes sense. Good. Well, I think that's a pretty good place to probably wrap this. What moments are we looking forward to create to? And you as audience members, what are some of the specific applications that are most exciting to you? Are you thinking there's opportunities in this space to get more specific with the types of plant-based products you're looking to roll out? So Carrie, back to you.
Awesome. So thank you to the audience for joining us. Thank you so much, Greg and Webb, for the helpful insight and perspectives on winning with a plant-based strategy. We do have some time for questions now. And while we'll give you a moment here, you could start entering your questions. I wanted to share that our next session is February 16th, and we'll be focusing on winning back consumer trust. We'll have our special guests from the Center for Food Integrity and IFT joining us. So to secure your spot and get this on your calendar, you could pull up your cell phone and use this QR code to register for our ongoing education series. All right, so let's see if we have any questions for you guys. All right, we've got a couple. So for taste trade-offs, does the information apply only to plant-based foods, or does the information on consumers' willingness to trade off taste for environmental friendly ingredients hold for non-plant-based foods also?
That's a great question. So some of the data points that I was talking about in terms of trade-offs, those trade-offs are were from generalized information. We've split the data by plant-based buyers and non-buyers, but they fairly, for the most part, they hold pretty true to any type of food product, as far as like people willing to trade off taste, et cetera, so forth. So in the plant-based space, as an example, more of the people who are current plant-based buyers are willing to trade off taste. But you go outside that, they're not. But yeah, this is not the question we asked when we got that data wasn't specific to plant-based foods. When we did this research, we did it generically, any of the foods you buy, as well as then we drilled down into specific things like plant-based sandwich meats, or sandwich meats in general, both meat and non-meat, ground meats in general, et cetera, so forth. And you see that trade-off different by category.
Great. Okay. Another one here. When companies are working towards clean label plant-based foods, what trade-offs should they choose first? So we talked about a few. Should they trade off price, taste, environment, health, and in what order? So what would you suggest?
That's a really good question. So I think that for our vantage point, it always comes back to who are you targeting for your product. You really always need to start with an understanding of what moment and what people are in that moment. So if you're targeting a group of people, then you can identify really quickly which trade-offs that particular group of people are willing to make. So when you're going to go to clean label, right? We know that taste is an example in the several categories we looked at for people who are non-buyers of plant-based. We know that taste was one of the things that they would not trade off. That was the biggest. So you would have to nail down taste first, otherwise they'll make that trade-off, if you will. But then depending on the moment you're targeting, price may or may not be a factor, because if the group that you happen to be targeting is more affluent, then and above that, higher level on the Maslow's hierarchy, if you will, then you can get away with slightly higher prices and certainly market entry that way. But to get a bigger, broader reach, you would definitely need to nail down price.
Okay, and it looks
I
like
think-
oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll add a little bit. I think for developing these products, that the technology is the trade-off, and that's where the price and eating experiencing comes in. So there are methylous cellulose replacements that are a clean label. They don't work as good. So if you're willing to make the trade-off, you're not going to have the same eating experience potentially. But again, that's based on what the end application is, whether it's a burger patty, a sausage, or a chicken nugget. You can create different eating experiences with different clean label ingredients, but you're going to at some point have that this is where my stake in the ground is from a consumer call on ingredient panel standpoint, to get what the consumer is looking for. So if the consumer is willing to make that trade-off because it doesn't methyl cellulose in it, then you've hit your consumer target.
Right. So yeah, so that comes back to specific application, right? If you're the more specific you can make your application, chances are the more control you have over managing price as well, right? So if you're the more generic product you're trying to build, the harder it is to control your cost.
Yeah. And it looks like adding to that question, out of environment and healthy claims, what is the most important to customers?
Oh, that's a good one. We'll take a big picture generic. We certainly know that environment and sustainability, in our webinar I had last month, with Dave. I think it was it's basically 50% of the population are looking for sustainable products. That's really a much bigger portion of the population that I had anticipated when we were going through that research. And certainly, if you just say healthy, it's like saying, are you a good mom? Everybody wants to be a good mom. Everybody wants to be healthy. But whether they'll trade it off or not, that's a different issue, right? Whereas with the environment, we actually saw a much higher portion of the people willing to trade off for environmentally friendly than we anticipated. So I would, if I was don't have clean data on this, but I would certainly hedge towards, I think environment is pitched above health, although it's going to be hard to call out. I'm an environmentally friendly product, but it's not very good for you. It's kind of a tough call there. Probably in moderation is maybe if you added that to the end, you're fine too.
On the development side of things, we're often asked to replicate the protein nutritional profile. Protein content, comparatively fat content, comparatively carbohydrate content, we really can't do much to, because a lot of the isolated texture proteins have carbohydrates carried with them, but really it's that protein and fat content hurdle with the eating experience. So that's the barometer that a lot of the sales channels are being measured by. If you bring in a burger with 1 gram less protein, well, why is it 1 gram less protein? So those are some of the healthy claim or nutrition panel hurdles that are being called out. We're not being asked necessarily to reduce fat, although we try. It's really those macronutritionals in comparison to the meat set.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And I imagine you have a lot, not just protein, but probably sweetness, right? And trying to nail down, because within this space, clean label, that's no artificial sweeteners, but there's all sorts of sweetener alternatives out there as well.
All right. Well, it looks like that's the end of our questions. So I think we're a wrap here. And again, thank you all for joining us, and thank you, Webb and Greg.
You're welcome.
Okay, take care, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.